Okay. Hi, everyone. As you're joining, we're just gonna wait just a minute to let everyone start to funnel in, and then we will welcome our guests. And while you're waiting, if you want to pull up the chat and you guys can let us know where you're joining from, we'd love to see where you're tasting wine and cheese from. Okay, and it looks like people will still be funneling in, but with that, I'll turn it over to Janet to welcome you guys and introduce our special guests.
Hello, everybody. Hi there. Good evening. I'm Janet Fletcher. I'm here in my kitchen in Napa Valley, and I want to welcome you to Cheese O'Clock. Laura and I have not done this since May, so we're very excited to be back with you tasting cheese and wine. And you are in for an hour of some really delicious cheese and wine. I have to tell you, with me and my colleague Laura Werlin and our two special guests, Caroline Hostetler from Quality Cheese, joining us from Florida, and Elise Terlato of Terlato Wines, who's joining us from Chicago. So with that, I just want to say that I am a cheese writer, a food writer. I published the Planet Cheese blog and have written several books on cheese, and I'm just delighted to have you all here with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to get Cheese O'Clock underway.
Hi, everybody. Yes, it's really exciting to be back again, right here where we started, right here in our chairs virtually. But Cheese O'Clock brings cheese and wine to life, and that's all. That's what matters. So yeah, I'm the author of several books on cheese, and of course a co-host of Cheese O'Clock. But I do all kinds of cheese and wine pairings. That's primarily what I do. Today, so first of all, for anybody who has never been or has joined us for Cheese O'Clock, the concept, as you will find out, is obviously we have 4 cheeses, we have 2 wines, and we have a special cheese guest, which we'll get to in a moment, and we have a special wine guest. And the 4 of us talk about the cheeses, the wines, and it's just, and it's interactive in the sense that we encourage everyone to use the chat and the Q&A to ask questions or just make comments or whatever it is. And we'll go from there. So let's see. The other thing is this is a very social event, even if, as I said before, there's a screen in between. And given that, the best way to communicate in terms of socially is to use social media. So we encourage you to use social media and post pictures of your cheese plate, your cheese board, your cheese party. You can do a selfie like this with you, with your cheese board and all of that. And I wrote in the chat, I'm curious, please respond in the chat, how many people you're with. Is it just you? Is it just 2 of you? Are you having a cheese party? Just let us know. Okay, now back to you, Janet.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I have the great pleasure of introducing Elise Terlato with Terlato Wines. Elise is 4th generation in this family business, along with her brother and sister. She's going to tell us a little bit about the 2 wines we're tasting tonight. She is the digital marketing manager for Terlato, and she is in her 4th year with the company. She has a level 2 certificate from the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, so she's quite wine knowledgeable. And she also has a diploma from the Cordon Bleu in London in wine marketing and gastronomy. No, the wine business and gastronomy. So Elise, I'm just delighted to have you here. I knew your grandfather. He's been here for dinner several times. I know your grandmother, so it's really fun for me to meet the next generation. And just, I have a feeling, Elise, are you there, or you look a little stuck?
Yeah,
I don't know if you're able to hear us.
Hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
You know, we get the audio. So yeah, please tell us a little bit about Terlato Wines and what we're about to taste tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janet, and thank you guys for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. Just to give some history and background, Terlato Wines is a multi-generational family-owned company. As Janet said, I'm the fourth generation. It started over about 70 years ago by my great-grandfather, starting out as a retail store on Grand and Western, if anyone's familiar, in Chicago, Illinois. But the timeline of our company really shows that we've touched all aspects of the industry. So from retail to distribution, and currently we're working as an importer and marketer for premium spirits, non-alcoholics, as well as about 60 wine brands from all over the world. So, and with that, for the past 15 plus years, we have also taken ownership of our own family vineyards and wineries. So some of those are Chimney Rock and Rutherford Hill from Napa, Sanford Winery from Santa Barbara, Clifton from Washington State, and then Terlato Vineyards from Friuli, Italy. So the two wines that we'll be tasting today will be from our family-owned vineyards, Terlato Vineyards, Pinot Grigio, and Rutherford Hill Merlot. And so before we get into the details of the brands themselves and the wines themselves, I think it's really important to note, that our goal of achieving quality is endless. And so we're always looking to produce and curate quality wines through these brands. So I don't know, I know that there was a my visual is kind of wonky right now, but I know there were some slides. So I don't know if they're up on the screen.
Yep, they're there.
Okay, perfect. I'm, for some reason, unable to follow along with those slides, but the first one I'm assuming will be the glass and bottle of Terlato Vineyards. Go ahead, take a sip. Hopefully you've been drinking it already, but just a little bit about the history on this wine. So, oh, I've lost visual. Okay, sorry. Technical difficulties always with these Zoom calls, but just to kind of take you through this, in 1979, there's a really great story. My grandfather, Anthony Terlato, introduced American consumers to Pinot Grigio, the varietal, which earned him the title of Father of Pinot Grigio. So today, Pinot Grigio does continue to be a very popular varietal that's imported here. And so if you go to the next slide, I believe there should be something that kind of talks to the place and the setting. So Friuli, Italy is known as a prestigious white wine growing region. It is small, but it ranks as the best for producers of Pinot Grigio due to the climate and soil diversity. So you'll see in the pictures, there's a great diversity in soils, which helps to create this richness, but also a very fresh white wine with great complexity. And being on the next slide, the vineyards are in northeastern Italy. So Friuli is the northeastern corner of Italy. So you get a little bit of a mix of climate as well. You get the Slovenian Alps to one side and the Adriatic Sea on the other. And this really helps to moderate the temperatures and climate to extend the growing season. So very similar to California, you have these warm sunny days and cool nights. And it just lends itself to a really great climate for winemaking. And if you go along and taste, you'll notice some of the quality cues as well on the label, but they're hand harvested grapes that are estate grown, meaning they're all of the grapes are grown in our vineyard and not outsourced. And then the hillside vineyards. So you'll see in the images with the diverse soils and old vines ranging from 20 to 40 years. All of these components are quality factors, as I mentioned, and really factors that make for a more complex wine than you would normally expect from a Pinot Grigio. Most are grown on flatland, so those are just some things to note in the wine as you taste. I don't know if we want to move into Rutherford Hill.
Yeah, let's go ahead and hear about that wine as well.
Okay, perfect. So if you go to the next slide, Rutherford Hill, this is our Merlot from Napa Valley, AVA in California. And it's known as one of the pioneers of Merlot production in Napa Valley. So if you go to the next slide, you'll just see a little bit more about the brand, the history of this brand. You know, the first vineyard was produced in 1974. And it was in 1996 that our family purchased the winery and really embraced this thought of our commitment to quality over quantity. And so some of those things that are included in this wine, we have an award-winning winemaker, Marisa Taylor, who is really interested in these Bordeaux varietals that we blend with the Merlot. So there's 86% of Merlot in this wine, but also blended with traditional Bordeaux varietals such as Cabernet Sauvignon. I think there's about 6%. And then the rest is Malbec, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, and Syrah. And they're also estate grown, about 70% estate grown, with 100 variations of soils in Mediterranean climate. So, you know, and the steep mountain slopes. So you can see here there's the trend to achieve this quality in both of the wines. And something that is unique that's noted here on the slide for Merlot, for Rutherford Hill, the winery, we really aim to leave the land in a better place than it was when we received it. So sustainable practices are really important to us. We're a part of Green Napa. And some of those practices are, you know, being solar powered, 100%, no sulfur application, natural pest control, things like that, monitoring the water, you know, that will help us to support our agricultural commitment as well. And there's also some of the pictures here are showing the caves. I think if you go to the next slide, this is more of a close-up, that's also part of the sustainability, is having the cave aging for natural cooling systems. So that's really our trademark here at Rutherford Hill, that the caves are definitely something that people want to go see, and it seems like a more natural experience.
That's good job, Elise. That was not easy to narrate slides that are not in front of you. I'm impressed.
I'm sorry you can't see me right now.
I'm sorrier for you. Well, with that, I think I will introduce our cheese guest. And she is her name is Caroline Hostetler. She's the owner of Quality Cheese, based in Florida, but it's a Swiss cheese importer. And no, it's not necessarily the Swiss cheese that you're thinking of that comes sliced in the deli section. This is very, very different. Caroline was a food journalist and then came to the US in 1996, but missed her Swiss cheeses because she is Swiss. So she came back armed with some of her favorites, met with chefs in New York and New Orleans and San Francisco and a couple of other cities, Chicago. And by the time she returned to Switzerland, there were 2 orders on her fax machine. This tells you how long ago it was. For those of you that don't know what a fax machine, look it up at the museum. And anyway, and then, and subsequently in 2002, she developed a program called Adopt an Alp, which Caroline, I'm going to have you talk about later when we get to the cheese. And just to button up this bio, a cheese colleague of Janet's and mine, a guy named Max McCalman, described Caroline as the one who educated people and raised the bar when it comes to Swiss cheese in the US. And I would agree. So Caroline, thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now just a couple of more reminders and then we will get to the tasting. Again, the Q&A in the chat, which many of you seem to be using, so we should be good with that. Zoom registration is still open for next week's, December 9th, which is we call Break Out the Bubbles, so you can guess what that is. It's 2 sparkling wines and 4 cheeses, and it's maybe too late to get the cheeses, maybe not the wines, because a lot of them, they're available widely. And you can look at the uncorked.com site to find out where to buy. And then let's see, also the Zoom, this this presentation and next week's will be available as a recording on Janet's and my sites. So you can watch it later, again, for your repeat enjoyment, or for people who may have missed it. All right, Janet, let's get going.
Yeah, time to taste. But first, I want to add one little thing, which is that I am going to, as soon as this is over, put some more inventory back in my online site for next week's tasting. So although I won't be able to get the cheese to you in time for the tasting, if you want to participate, you can still order the cheese, you can still order the wine, and because we're recording it next week, you can watch it, you know, a few days later when your cheese and wine shows up. So if by any chance you want to do it, but you can't make the tasting next Thursday, you can still participate, just in a delayed form. So I think we're ready to taste, and we're going to start, as you always do in a cheese tasting, with our youngest cheese by a bit, and our mildest cheese. Although I think it's, for this cheese, it's kind of at the end, it's nearing the end of its life. It's Nettle Meadows Simply Sheep. It's 100% sheep cheese. It's from the Adirondacks in New York. For those of you who are listening in from the Bay Area, this cheese has in a way, it was born in the Bay Area. The two women who own Nettle Meadow used to live in the Oakland Hills. The one was a lawyer and one was a legal secretary, and they had this property in the Oakland Hills with a lot of like shrubby stuff, and so they got some goats. And the goats were just to keep the grass down, to keep the landscape under control. Well, of course, they started making goat cheese in their kitchen, and they discovered they were good at it, and they really enjoyed it, and they loved having the goats. So, and they didn't like being in the legal business, so they shut down their legal work, bought a goat farm in the Adirondacks. This is about 20 years ago, and started Nettle Meadow. Now, what you need to know about Nettle Meadow, we're going to show a very short video, but they are cheese. They make cheese to support what they do at Nettle Meadow, which is, it's an animal sanctuary. They take in all these abandoned, sick, no longer productive animals and care for them. And the way that they support that is by making cheese. So can we show that quick little video of Nettle Meadow?
We sure can. Just hang on for 1 second while I share it.
In the meantime, welcome back, Elise.
Yeah. In the flesh. Yeah.
Okay, are you guys seeing the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go for it.
Hey folks, here's a shout out from Nettle Meadow Farm, where we're making so much cheese still, and we hope that you'll help us eat all of that cheese. We've donated so much to our local food banks, but we're hoping that our customers will purchase from their favorite internet retail outlet or local cheese store, and remember that Nettle Meadow logo and all of these beautiful sanctuary animal faces the next time you shop for cheese.
So as you can tell, that was filmed early in the pandemic. They actually donated $100,000 worth of cheese to the food bank because all their accounts shut down and they couldn't sell it. So, but they're back in business, and they're making this cheese. There's just almost nothing like it in the US. First of all, we have very few sheep cheeses. We have very few bloomy rind, you know, this Penicillium candidum rind, this style of sheep cheese in the US. This cheese has a Penicillium candidum is what they add. It's a mold they add to the milk to make this rind form, like a camembert rind. They, at Nettle Meadow, they actually use 2 strains of Penicillium. One strain is to make the rind grow, and the other strain is to make it not grow too much, to kind of put the brakes on. So we're going to slice into it, and I think you're going to find a very luscious piece of, a very luscious, creamy, kind of mushroomy cheese. Now, the thing to know is they have almost no sheep milk between October and December. The sheep really, really slow down. This is a cheese they normally make about once a day. At this time of year, they're making it like, well, she was surprised we could even find it. They make it, they've made 5 batches in the last 60 days. So it's a rarity. We're lucky to have it. And it's probably, they released it at 2 weeks, but the owner, Sheila, told me she doesn't think it tastes like much until 30 days in, 40. She likes it between 45 and 90 days. And I think we're kind of there. I think probably this is at least a 45-day-old cheese, and you can tell because the rind is starting to get some coloration on it. That's, if you like cheeses stronger in flavor, that's a good thing. So I'm going to cut into mine. And the other thing about the sheep milk at this time of year, there's not very much of it, but it is super, super high in fat and protein. It peaks in fat and protein at this time of year. And so it's really well suited to this type of cheese. So yeah, the rind is nice and thin. I like seeing that. And I was kind of expecting it to be a little, I don't know what I expected. I thought it might be a little more like a triple cream, though it's not a triple cream. No. Real mushroom smells.
Well, while you're chewing, Janet, I was just going to say that I know a lot of people often wonder whether to eat the rind on a cheese like this or not to. In theory, you can if you want to. You don't have to, but it's meant to be eaten. However, when a cheese like this starts to get aged, as this one is, sometimes the rind doesn't help the paste being the inside of the cheese. And so, and particularly with wine pairing, the rind, this kind of rind can send the wine off into a not so great direction. But some people, I've noticed, actually like the direction the wine will go. They feel like it makes it stronger, whatever the wine is. And I'm not so sure that that's the goal if you're the winemaker, but doesn't really matter. If you like it, that's what does matter. In this case, because it's interesting. So I opened this cheese, I took it out of the refrigerator quite a while ago, because when I tried it earlier today, and it was the rind was very, what we call ammoniated. It's just almost smells like ammonia. That a lot of that, since being out has blown off. So I find the rind not so pungent as it was, but it's definitely different and almost a little chalky as compared with that really luscious fudgy paste. So it's kind of up to you is the bottom line with the rind. And I'd be curious, Janet, what you think about the rind, and Elise, what you think about the cheese with the wine, both with the rind and without it.
I'm finding the rind perfectly edible, perfectly delicious. And I've had my cheese out for hours, and so I didn't, any ammonia smell is blown off. I am loving this cheese. It's not, I don't find it ammoniated. I don't find it bitter, which this type of cheese sometimes can be. Here's something I almost forgot to tell you that I was so surprised to learn. This cheese is coagulated with thistle rennet. Not with animal rennet, not with what we call non-animal rennet or vegetable rennet. This is coagulated with thistle rennet. It comes from a plant in the artichoke family, the cardoon. When they flower, they take the stamens and they extract a compound that can coagulate milk. This is a very, very old practice. It's mostly done in Spain and Portugal with sheep cheeses. And I was so surprised to learn that Nettle Meadow is doing it. It usually creates a kind of cheese that becomes soupier as it ages. That's not happening here. And sometimes it can leave a bitter taste, but I'm not picking up any bitterness. Caroline, do you get any bitterness in this?
I think I have a piece here that is much older than yours, much more aged. My rind is actually dry and not pleasant to eat really anymore. It just passed. But in this case, what Laura said, to me, the rind is like the natural packaging of a cheese. It's the protection of what's inside. So unless it's wax, it's up to you if you eat it or not. It's always edible. It's natural. It won't hurt anybody. And it's very interesting when you learn to work with cheese, to taste cheese, to learn the language of cheese, to eat a cheese with the rind and without the rind, eat the paste close to the rind or the one in the core, in the center of the cheese. So here, to me, my cheese actually is getting runnier. Mine is close to a torta now and to Portuguese, beautiful, torta de casar, let's say from Spain. It's a rich, 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 buttery, and it does reflect almost like green asparagus flavors. It's very pleasant with the Pinot Grigio for me.
Elise, what are you thinking wine-wise? What are you enjoying? Whoops, we don't have her audio.
Where's your, are you muted, Elise?
I think she's muted.
There you go. Now you're
Can you
not.
hear me?
Yes.
Now, yes.
Okay. No, I agree with Caroline. First of all, this cheese is amazing. I keep eating it. But I think that it's interesting. I would say the Terlato, the Pinot Grigio goes really nicely with it. My rind is similar to yours, Janet, where it's still tasting okay. And I tried both with the rind and without it. I kind of prefer without it with the Pinot Grigio, but they're both of the versions go delicious with that. And it's interesting because there's a common misconception that white wine does not go well.
Oh, oops. You got muted again. Who did that?
Did we lose her?
No, it's just muted again.
Huh.
It's the mute gremlins. Oh, you're
Can you
still
hear me?
Yeah, now.
Okay. Sorry about that. But yes, I don't know if you heard what I was saying before about like a common misconception of that only red wine goes with cheese. But this is a really good example of how white wine actually provides that freshness that you have with maybe a creamy cheese. And there's a really nice complexity there that balances out, I think, between the wine and cheese.
Did you try it with the Rutherford Hill?
Yes, I tried it with the Rutherford Hill. I think it's wonderful with the Rutherford Hill. I would drink it and eat them together. But I think what I'm experiencing with the Rutherford Hill is that it maybe the fruitiness in the Rutherford Hill doesn't shine as much. So it doesn't feel like it's emphasizing the wine the way that, it maybe should.
Got it. Okay, I think we better move on, or we're never going to get to the well, not the encore, but the finale of Caroline's cheese. All right, so the next one is I have to laugh because somebody in the chat said one of the cheeses is quite odoriferous, and I can tell you that it is the next cheese, which is called Cabra La Mancha. This is a cheese made in Maryland, a famous cheese making state, I might add. And when they started, Pablo and Mike are the owners. And when they started, they had their own goats. This was back in, I think it was 2002. And, but back then in Maryland, making unpasteurized cheeses was illegal. So they had to make pasteurized cheeses, which they've been making ever since. In 2006, they sold their herd, and now they get all their milk from Amish farms within 100 miles of their cheese making operation, which is in a place called Accident, Maryland. I have not yet looked up why they call it Accident, but I find that funny. Anyway, Pablo, I think, is just one of the best cheesemakers in America. And this cheese, Cabra La Mancha, they say that they kind of modeled it after Basque cheeses. Basque cheeses are sheep's milk primarily, but yet it's called Cabra La Mancha, which is maybe on the Spanish side of the Basque region. And it's a washed rind cheese, which means that it gets washed or rubbed with a solution of salt and water, a brine, but also special cultures that turn the rind orange-ish, as you can see, and also a little bit odoriferous, or at least a more exaggerated aroma. Now, speaking about the rind once again, this is one where the rind is probably going to overpower the paste, the interior of the cheese. And so as it is, that aroma, everything on that rind kind of gets into the cheese. So you will still taste that, the strength of that, but it is not as strong as if you taste the rind itself. They use a vegetarian rennet, which is sort of what Janet was alluding to. They don't use the other kinds, microbial it's called. And this cheese is aged about 90 days, about 3 months. So what I would say about this cheese, I haven't yet tasted it, but the one thing about it is that when you get it at your local cheese store, it will probably be not be as strong as what we're having today. I think sometimes a cheese like this can suffer in the mail, as it were, and that may not be what's going on. It might just be an older version because washed rind cheeses get stronger as they age. So I don't really know, but all I want to say though is that if it's a little strong for you, which for some people it's like the stronger the better, for other people it's like no, that you should give it another chance is what I was going to say. Okay, so I'm going to try it. Janet, have you already tried it?
Yes, I have, and I'm loving it. I adore this cheese. I'm seeing a comment from somebody who's saying they think it's too strong to eat, and without tasting your piece, I don't know whether it might have, be from an older wheel. We're not all having cheese from the same wheel. Mine is divine. It is strong. It is stinky, and I love that. But it's not bitter.
No.
It's full of umami. It's got kind of an earthy taste. I definitely am eating the rind. It's stronger at the rind. It's a little more almost kind of smoky, bacony at the rind. I found it was hard on the red. I really didn't think it was a good friend of the Merlot, but I thought the Pinot Grigio handled it. This style of cheese isn't easy on wine, but I thought the Pinot Grigio hung in there with it and was a pleasing match. Caroline, somebody said they thought it was kind of like a Swiss Tilsiter, which is not a I know. But
I would not say that, but what I really, really like about this cheese is the texture. To me, this is such a complex cheese. I love the texture has a smoothness to it, but it's still grainy at the very same time in a very pleasant way. I love this cheese a lot. And yes, it is strong. I do think that a washed rind does suffer when it's packaged like it was packaged, like that double layer of plastic. And you can see that the rind has, stopped to grow or to develop in some parts. Maybe there was a label on the top too, but on the side, on the edge, the rind is beautiful. People who think this cheese is too strong, they should give it a try tomorrow again. Forget what you experienced right now. Tomorrow, let it rest at least an hour, better 2 hours, and then you cut off the rind real generously, and you only taste the paste. Washed rind cheeses always have a bigger nose than really the flavor profile. They're usually, let's say, funky to smell, but very lovely and sweet to taste. Generally, if you cut out the inside of a washed rind cheese that appalls to many people, they would not have an idea that it was a washed rind cheese when you only serve on the paste. So Taleggio, all these nice examples, and Epoisse, all washed rind cheeses that you could feed to a baby. So sweet and so creamy. Yeah. This is beautiful.
And I was just going to say, so again, this cheese has really, I took these cheeses out quite a while ago. It has really benefited from breathing outside of its packaging, as cheeses will. Also, I just want to point out, I used a cheese plane for this, and yeah, I did. And it's, even though it's kind of I love cheese planes. We haven't talked about that, Jan. Even though it's kind of a squishy cheese, it worked fine. And what that does is that you're not getting, it really allows you to get just a sliver of the paste, of the rind. So when I go down like this, I'm just getting a little bit, it's very thin, but it's also, so it's just a thin piece and then a thin amount of rind too. So it's a great way to kind of start your way in case you're afraid that it just smells so strong that, yeah, yes, it really,
I go with the corset stuff here.
it looks like a torture device there, Caroline.
The Swiss don't use these. I heard it from Caroline herself yesterday. They don't use these because, you don't get enough cheese. They like their chunks. So yeah, these are really more like the Dutch use them, the Scandinavians use them, but I like a cheese plane myself. I think we've lost Elise.
Oh, there she is.
Okay. Elise, do you want to weigh in on the wine for this cheese?
You're muted though. You're muted.
Muted.
Elise, you're muted.
Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
now we can.
Sorry. Yes, the moment, I think, Janet, you nailed it when you said, the moment I tried this cheese, the red wine, I was like, oh, gotta, grab the red. And it really made the Merlot nice and smooth. But I will say I tried it with the white as well. And I think that because of the strength, there is, that you pick up the complexity in the wine as well. So I think it could go, great with either one, depending on, what you prefer.
Yeah, there's a long history of serving this type of cheese, these washed rind cheeses like Munster, with white wine, with Pinot Gris from Alsace. So although Italian Pinot Grigio is a little different, it's it's the same grape, and I think they work with these washed rind cheeses. Anyway, I love this cheese, and it's so rare. This kind of washed rind goat cheese, it's an unusual style, and I really applaud them for making it.
And also, I just want to say one other thing when it comes to cheese and wine pairing. Well, I say cheese and wine. I bet Elise says wine and cheese. And that is that we all taste things differently. And we also know that not everybody out there that's watching tonight has these same wines. We hope you do, but if you don't, you might be having very different experiences than we are to begin with. But also, so I preferred that cheese with the Pinot Grigio. Well, depending what part of the cheese I got, actually, with or without the rind. And by the way, just as another aside, the rind, if you notice, for those of you that dare to eat it, it has these little crystals, this little tacky surface with these little crystals, which I find utterly compelling. I just love eating those. But I think of the two wines, I might have preferred the Pinot Grigio more, just because I felt like the Merlot kind of lost some of its fruit along the way, and I want that fruit along with everything else that's in it. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, it's always, when you do a pairing, it's what are you looking for? Do you want to complement a texture, a flavor, an impression, or do you want to contrast it? So you always go for those. To me, this cheese is almost too complex with the Merlot or for the Merlot. I think the acidity, the brightness of the white here is perfect with it. It kind of breaks that complex thing. It makes you think less and just enjoy more, And with Merlot, I think it's too heavy, guys. Even though Merlot is not heavy, but it's two really complex things coming together, and none is shining at its full potential. I think I prefer the white with this.
Well, let's move on to our next cheese. We have another sheep cheese. This one from Italy, from Tuscany, and we chose it because it's a little bit different from what I think most people think of when they think Italian pecorino. I know from my experience teaching that when I say pecorino, people think hard, dry, grating cheese, like a pecorino romano, something you put on pasta. A lot of people don't know that you can have a pecorino that's very young and moist and shavable, not really grateable, and it's not meant to go on pasta. It's meant as a table cheese. So this pecorino from Tuscany, it's a PDO cheese. It's like, it has an appellation. It has regulations that govern how it's made and where it can be made. It is probably just, I'm going to say maybe 60 days old. That's my guess. And it is meant to be eaten young. You don't age this out and get an aged Tuscan pecorino. This is made to sell young. And this is the kind of pecorino that Italians are going to put on an antipasto board with the salumi, with the breadsticks, in the olives. This is a kind of a before dinner cheese. It's great to cook with. In spring, when there are fresh fava beans, this is what I want with my fresh fava beans, just, cubes of this and favas. It's going to be mild, and it's going to just, I hope, have that kind of sweet, buttery sheep taste. So let's give it a try. It has just the thinnest kind of rind. I think they probably put something on the outside to keep any mold from growing. But it's just, it's a simple cheese, but I want people to understand. Oh, and I just really especially want you to know where it's made. It's made in Tuscany on a large farm called Il Forteto, Forteto, Il Forteto. Il Forteto is a place I have dreamed of visiting for many years. It got started almost 45 years ago by several, like half a dozen young men right out of college who were kind of the hippies, what we would call hippies in those days. They were very progressive. They wanted to kind of start a commune. And their parents said, "You guys are nuts. We sent you to college and you're starting a commune. You're going to fail." And in fact, they have been enormously successful. They're now like the largest Pecorino Toscano producer, I think. They're wealthy. But they use their funds to run this enormous farm that houses disabled people who are disadvantaged in some way, or it's kind of like need foster care. So there are a whole lot of young people on this farm who do jobs that they are, capable of doing, but probably couldn't do in the larger world. So it's kind of it's a do-good place. In addition to making cheese, they have beef cattle. They have, they sell produce at their own store. I think they have a little restaurant. But since I've never had the chance to go, I called a friend of mine, Laura, Lee Smith, another journalist, cheese journalist. She went there about 5 years ago, and she told me she didn't want to leave. If she could have figured out a way to live there, she would have moved right into Il Forteto. It's such a special place, and the cheeses are fabulous. They're very classic. This is just a very classic young Tuscan pecorino.
So it is young, and you say that I can imagine it on a spring fava bean salad. Of course, me being me, I can also imagine it in a grilled cheese sandwich because of how its moisture, and it would just be wonderful that way. To me, there are two characteristics of it that are very, very typical sheep's milk. One is there's a distinctive tang, and the other is just for lack of a better word, a sheep's milk flavor. There's something that's very savory about it, not barnyardy, not gamey, but there's a sheepiness to it that just is very distinct from cow's milk, which tends to be, at this stage, a lot more mild and maybe less assertive, or not assertive, but less flavorful, I would say, than this is. And anyway, this is really a very compelling cheese. It's sort of, you have to kind of let it speak to you. And when it does, you realize there's a lot more complexity going on than you might think at first, or at least that's what happened to me.
I want to say, tell people a little tip. This just came out of vacuum packaging. It's was suffocating. So if you have a cheese plane, or even just a table knife, shave the outside just a little bit, shave it off. And you are going to get rid of that outer layer that's a little bit stale, a little bit oxidized, and you're going to reveal a whole new, fresh aroma in this
Especially cheese. Smell it first. This is a cheese. It smells like a baby's head to me. It's like soft caramel. It's so beautiful. The smell would let me buy a ton of this cheese. I really like that smell here. And I like the smoothness, the richness, what you said, Laura, the umami of the sheep, that almost broth, but very complex, very together, and very subtle. It's not a hard knock in your face. It's something very in the background, but it's very well balanced all in all. And I do like the Merlot with that one a lot.
What did you think, Elise?
I agree. It's interesting because when I tried the white wine, there was there's obviously acidity in the wine, but the acidity was almost too astringent. It became much stronger with this cheese. And I agree with Caroline, you know, the umami and the cheese goes really nicely with some of those fruit, you know, full, rich flavors that you get from the Merlot.
Yeah, just imagine yourself, you know, your friends have come over for dinner, you've made a beautiful board with your salumi and your olives and your pecorino, you know, I think either of these wines can work, but you know, to me it's a little more pleasing with the Merlot. We're getting into kind of red wine territory. Just to clarify from some of the comments I'm seeing in the chat, this Il Forteto also makes a pecorino Toscano stagionato, which means an aged one. But the recipe is a little bit different. The process is a little bit different. But that cheese is going to be more, you know, more firm, more nutty, more intense, and definitely a table cheese as well. Not something you would grate on pasta either, as far as I'm concerned, but a more intense experience. So, and definitely a red wine cheese, if you ask me. So.
All right.
Yeah, Jan,
Oh,
I have to say I was a culprit of I never thought that pecorino could be soft. So I was one of those people that you were referring to before. I've only ever had it like over pasta shaved. It's really interesting to see this other, you know, version of it.
Yeah, it's great with I use it a lot in pasta, or like you're making a baked, you know, like a, you know,
Exactly.
lasagna. It's, you know, it's great with baked pasta dishes. I think we need to leave a lot of time for Caroline because I know she has so much to say, and I can't wait to hear from her. So,
So Caroline, tell us about Hockey Brig, and also somewhere in here, if there's time, I think it'd be interesting for you to share what Adopt an Alp is all about. But let's talk about the cheese first.
Yeah, so Hockey Brig, the last cheese on your plate. This is basically, the name refers to the name of a mountain that basically starts or has its feet at the edge of that village where the cheese is made. The cheese is made in an independent little village dairy, which nowadays in Switzerland, like around the world, they are disappearing really, really quick. So I have big respect, and I try to support people who want to stay independent, don't get bought up by bigger companies. These people still do this, they fight hard. Hockey Brig is a raw cow milk cheese. Like 85% of Swiss cheeses are made of cow milk. It is crafted in the style of a traditional Gruyere. Of course, it's not made in that area. It's not an AOP cheese. It's not a Gruyere by any means. It is only about 8 kilos, 15 pounds, as opposed to a Gruyere that is about 75 pounds. But basically, the recipe is the same. The technique is the same. The cultures are very similar. Because the cheese is a much smaller format, it will age much faster. Hockey Brig is at its best between the age of 8 and about 12 months. And the big difference in the making is that Hockey Brig gets washed with a white wine instead of a regular salt and water brine. So this adds a little sweetness to the cheese. And you will see the flavor here is very complex. This is more now a cheese that the one we had before, that pecorino that Elise said, I didn't even know these cheeses exist. That's a wonderful experience. I see often that people want to go for extremes. They come to a market and say, what is your strongest, your stinkiest, your saltiest, your sharpest? And I love cheeses like the last ones that are so subtle that you have to notice them. They wake you up in the way that I have nothing loud to me, but I have all these little things that make me so beautiful. So the Hockey Brig is a little bit the opposite of what we had before. This one is very sturdy. it's balanced still, but it has a sharpness, it has the salt, it has the sweetness, almost a little bit of a smokiness, and then that fruit slightly. So it's a very complex cheese. What I also want to say about this cheese, people put my name together with Rolf Behler's name. Rolf Behler is one of the few Swiss affineurs. He is certainly the most provoking of the Swiss affineurs. He is a big ambassador for raw milk products. He is a person who does not tolerate any compromises when it comes to the milk type, the quality. Is a very consequent and a very outspoken person. He will split people into either this or that, black or white, good or bad. But with this style, he has done a lot of good for Swiss cheese, because he has made people think about Swiss cheese and contemplate and discover and try to find what they want. So Rolf Behler is not a maker, he is the affineur, the cheese ager, and the way he works is a bit unorthodox. When you go to his facility, you barely find any cheese. What he likes to do is work closely with cheesemakers and see what they do, how they do it. And then he will find people that work with him in the way that he says, you know, we should make a cheese that blah, blah, blah. And the cheesemaker maybe says, well, I don't know if that will work. Then he goes on and he finds someone who will work with him. So he collaborates. He is the thinker and the tinkerer and gives the ideas. He designs his dream cheeses. And then he finds partners who work with him. Hochhybrig is a classical and probably one of the first ones of those products that Rolf thought, you know, Gruyère's, it's a lot of space and a lot of aging time and a lot of work, manpower, and so forth. And so Hochhybrig is a very easy to handle, easy to love, very versatile cheese, does great with in the kitchen as a table cheese. It melts wonderfully. And that is, yeah, that's what Rolf Behler loves to do. He also is a big proponent of not bringing cheeses out of their birthplace, the facility, the cheesemaker's place. So he will go to the cheesemaker once a week and then maybe every other week when the cheese gets older to check on the cheese and to talk and discuss with the cheesemaker, okay, at what stage is it? What should we do? What's going well? What's not looking so good? What can we change? So he is very, very unorthodox. He comes from a different side, and that's good because that's what he wants to be. That's who he is. So when you go to his cellar with people, you usually have to say, okay, we stay here 15 minutes and drink a nice glass of champagne and then bring us to the cellars, please, because people want to see him and cheese.
Well, should we look at your, I know you brought some images for us. Should we take a look at those?
Sure. So here, that is basically the cow. I started with this slide because that's where cheese really starts. It's in the pasture, it's in the soil, in the grass, the biodiversity. Look at all the flowers and grasses you see here. So this now is an image from up in the Alps. And the big difference when we talk about the Alps and the valley pastures is you have a biodiversity that is completely different, that will immediately change from day one on when an animal goes up on an Alp for the summer for transhumans to take advantage of those higher elevations, the summer pastures. You have about 150 different grasses, herbs, flowers that these animals munch on and feed on all day. There's no added nutrition, there's no power food or whatever pills. That's all they have, and their metabolism changes from day on, and the composition of the milk from day 3 on is completely different, and it's in a way that we call it functional food in the end. They have the ideal ratios of omega-3 and omega-6. They have much more fat, much better fat, all of these wonderful things. So that's where Alp cheese starts.
Next slide.
Slow.
Do we have it? Yeah, there we go.
So here, that is a very traditional Alp cheese production. She is about to lift out the curd in that copper cauldron that was warmed, heated up by an open wooden fire. It's a beautiful, very traditional. She will have a helper for the next step to take the whole thing out. Not every production in the Alps is like this. There are state-of-the-art little modern facilities. Most of them are in between this and the very modern, but still it's a tradition that's kept alive and that is very important and dear to me because it keeps a whole lifestyle and our beloved Alp cheese alive. If these people don't do this anymore, if they don't see the sense anymore, the value, if we don't respect and value them anymore, then there's no reason to go through all the hassles and struggles they go to move with a whole family for 3 or 4 months, and they will just sell their milk to a big company, and we get uniform cheeses, maybe half of the kinds that we get now. So that would be very sad. So let's fight against that.
Right on. Next one.
So this is the other way. That is a super modern, that's her first year she works in that little dairy. This is actually a mobile container. When you see from the outside, it's like a Lego block, and it's a mobile dairy, standards of the highest levels, and it can be moved. They move these containers up to Alps where people cannot afford to renovate the dairy, or they don't have a dairy anymore because a father or grandfather gave up making cheese, and they just brought the animals up there to get healthy animals for the meat. So she, after this, the summer season on the Alp, a helicopter brings down this cubus of her dairy and puts it next to her farm down in the valley, and she makes cheese year round. Of course, she only makes Alp cheese when she's up there.
I love that, a hella cheese. I can't say that.
Very
I've never
cool.
heard of that.
Very cool.
Next slide. There you go.
This is one of the cellars. It's up on the Alps. It just shows that affinage is very important. It's as important as the cheese making process, basically, and the nutrition. This is a very innovative little cheesemaker who makes those cheeses in the net. The Knobbel, he calls it, a very Swiss name for basically a knot. It's a cheese that cheesemakers, when they go up on the Alp, the first 2 weeks, they only make small format, 2-pound small cheeses. And the reason is they need nutrition for themselves, their helpers, and their families. And these cheeses are ready to eat in 10 days. He found out that if he puts them in this shape as a ball and in a net, he does not have to wash them and turn them. They just age beautifully as it is. So he is smart. But he also makes Alp cheese. Next.
I want to try that, making that. Oh.
And this is just what I said, the tradition, you know, going on the Alp, transhumans, everyone who's interested, who is listening here, you can call me, email me anytime. I'm very happy to talk about this. But what I want to show here is that it's also a social part. We talk about cheese and about tradition and cows and soil and cheesemakers and rennet and all these nice things. But on the Alps, to me, what's very important, I always say, you stay sane on an Alp. You can't go crazy up there, because even little kids have their chores. They are part of a team. They learn by looking, by watching, by helping the grandfather. So it's all so natural. And I think in the time that we live, it is so healing and so soothing. And there's nothing more satisfying and really joyful than going, visiting those people. They take you in their house, they share everything they have with you, the food and the time and their knowledge, and it's just beautiful. And it reflects to me in those cheeses. We can do a whole thing on just that. And this is Affineur Rolf Behler. That's when he is working with one of his cheeses. You don't see how big his nose is. He has a very huge nose. That is one of the things that you can recognize him. And you know what people, maybe Elise has heard about this. People with a very large nose usually have a very good sense for taste and flavor. So he is very proud of that.
Wow.
That was just a short thing. Ask me questions. I don't know.
Well,
Wonderful.
That's
Thank you.
Yeah, that's terrific. And as is the cheese. I mean, again, the rind has an impact on the paste.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the things about the paste is that well, I have a question about it, but it also has like little crystals in it. So, which is a function of age, of course. And so I read that Hockeybreg is traditionally 8 months, but that you choose to age it longer. Is that standard? Is that what you do always, or not necessarily?
No, yeah, our Hockeybreg is, I would say, at least 10 to 11 months.
Okay.
And, yeah, and it's just, you know, even with the travel and everything, we never pull it before 8 months. That would be a badge that someone cannot explain why was it as far as it is, like when it's 6 months. No, usually it's at 8 months. We start looking at them and then we pull them. But often by the time they are here, they have 11, 12 months to them.
And Elise, what did you think of the cheese, and what did you think of it with your wines, or with the uncorked wines?
I'm not allowed to choose favorites, but this is definitely my preference. I would say this is my favorite cheese. And I could drink it, I could eat it with the Pinot Grigio, but I absolutely loved it with the Merlot. I felt like this was the salty to the sweet comparison, where you have this really nice, you know, saltiness, powerful but not overly powerful, and it goes really nice with, you know, the berries and the fruit in the Merlot. I really enjoy this comparison together.
I'm with you on that. I think that I could be wrong, but my guess is that in the Alps, they might drink this with a more oxidized white, but I could be wrong. I don't know, Caroline, is that the case or not so much?
We, in Switzerland, most people here don't know, but there are a lot of really, really cheese-friendly white wines in Switzerland. Like Chasselas is one of the classics, really, and really a lot of white wines go well with all kinds of cheeses. I mean, you can break the fat, you can, you know, do a contrast. So they don't drink a lot of wine in the Alps. They drink their schnapps in the morning after breakfast.
Way to start the day.
And it's called cleansing. But, you know, it's honestly, it's a matter of how do you bring goods up there? So you go for the basics, for what's really fundamental, firstly. And then sometimes you have visitors, or you have a family visit on a Sunday when you do the bare minimum, and they bring some wine and then they enjoy it. Yes.
So I know that, I mean, I would love to hear from you and Elise for about another hour, but I know we've already gone over our time. So I think that we better, Janet, unless you have something to add, I think we better wrap it up, and thank you both for being with us. Elise, you were a real champion through your technical difficulties, and I mean, just you're a real pro and so knowledgeable, and it's just great to have you, and your family legacy makes it all the more special. And Caroline, yeah, you're just an amazing person and in our cheese world, but well beyond that too. And so thank you for being part of this.
Thank you.
And I want to remind everybody, and also thanks just to Terlato Wines in general and to uncorked.com. And I want to remind everybody that, again, we're here next week, for Break Out the Bubbles. And also, of course, this has been recorded, as we said earlier, so you can watch it again or have other people watch it. And as Janet said, you can still order the cheeses and the wines, just not in time, most likely. Well, the wines, yes, even if you can't order them, but you can find them in your local area by next Thursday. So Janet, do you have anything to add?
Just want to echo you, Laura, and thank everybody for being with us, for your great comments and questions. And I just can't, imagine our cheese world without Caroline and her beautiful Swiss cheeses, or our wine world without the wonderful wines we get from Terlato and Uncorked. So thank you all. Hope to see you next week. And thank you, Laura. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise. Thanks. Thank you, Janet. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.